Hello and welcome to LP4 Assignment Communication Failures. Hopefully everybody will bear with me as I go through this lesson plan as I'm dealing with allergies and asthma, and hopefully we can get through this all. In this case, Herb had been working for R&D for many years on different projects. He had skills and the knowledge required to do his job. For quite some time he had worked by himself and was informed that a change was soon to happen. Herb was often offered a job as a project manager, but he didn't have all the training and skills that job required. But as management felt they were very confident that he could do his job. Herb took the job and he assigned people to assist him with the project. Herb then met with everyone, including the project sponsors, as usual. At one of the meetings, Herb walked in without paperwork. The sponsor immediately confronted him about asking for a report on cash flow projection. Herb recalled the meeting being discussion only, but he knew he shouldn't ask and question the sponsor's communication skills. That morning, Herb had confronted another employee about a promotion, which he recalled where the employee never asked for a letter of recommendation, but expected him to know what to do, and that he should write a letter for her. He apologized, but she was upset and left the office. Right after that, another employee entered the office, and Herb was going to have some engineering technician tests done on his work, which had not been done yet. And Herb said he had forgot to contact them with a memo to ensure that that had been done according to the instructions. Well, of course, it's Friday the 13th, and it couldn't get any worse. Wrong. One after another, people were approaching him about different situations, problems, and complaints that day. Herb tried to answer the questions or tried to resolve each problem as they came up during the day. But finally he decided he had enough, one after another, of the complaints. He decided to send an email to everyone announcing that he would cancel the afternoon meeting before the day got any worse. In this case, we saw the importance of communication, which could result in success or failure of a project. We see where risk management can be an important part of a project. Next, we have a list of questions about identification of risk management, risk quantifications, risk management plan, and risk response to problems, situations, and issues being addressed. In section 1 under risk management plan, I chose the first question: does it appear from the data provided in this case that risk management plan was in existence? In this case, I would say in the NASA shuttle situation, I don't feel that risk management plan was established. They knew of the possibilities of problems involving the cold and the parts of the shuttle, but didn't have a plan or a solution in mind on how to correct or change the situation at the time it was needed. Next question is there a difference between risk management plan, quality assurance, and safety plan, or are they the same? I learned the differences between risk management and quality assurance are very few, and they almost overlap each other, making it difficult to distinguish the methods and purpose of both functions from each other. Quality assurance plan breaks down barriers that are formed by skepticism. This plan is a document that outlines project procedures conducted while monitoring the project, which ensures that data collected and analyzes meet the requirements needed. Risk management plan is the process of identifying, assessing, and responding to, monitoring, and reporting any risk encountered, while the safety plan ensures that everyone involved is in the project the end remains safe and free from harm. Under the second section of risk identification, I chose how should the risk identification be resolved if there exist differences of opinions between customers and contractors. Many of the methods can be found for risk identification of a project. One of the main is the use of open communication to resolve problems, situations, and issues that may arise. The entire team should be involved in the final decision without criticism or risk of anything else being involved. All differences should be documented and including the method of resolution and the final outcomes. Second question, should senior management and sponsors be informed of all risk identified or just overall aggravated risk? I feel that anytime there is a potential or possibility for risk, anyone and everyone should be included, from senior management, stakeholders, sponsors, and everyone in the team. With that project, they should be fully informed of any risk that may be included and identified within the risk and the project. How should one identify and classify risk associated with pressures resulting from making promises that are too hard to be kept? The level and the amount of risk are higher in a project that has pressures when promises are made that are hard to or nearly impossible to keep. Too many pressures causes the team to become violent, individuals refusing to work and do their part in the project. In these situations, we see very motivated individuals get exhausted very quickly. Our next part is on risk quantification. First question, can we have both quantification and qualification risk evaluations in place at the same time? Yes, one can have a quantitative and a qualitative risk management system at the same time, as we can see as in the Space Shuttle program, which is a very complex situation. Not only is the obvious astronautical engineering aspect, but also from the human element of political and governmental agendas. With the prospect in mind, it would indeed be feasible or possible to develop methodological to quantified risk, but in all likelihood it is not realistic or practical to various complexities and factors listed above. With regards to the second part of the question, yes, one can have both in the system. However, there needs to be a priority given to one over the other. Ultimately, the weight needs to be given to the ability of the quantified risk rather than simply putting feelings and qualitative responses outlined in the challenger. How does quantify the dangers associated with the ice problems, such as the NASA incident? It is difficult to determine how much of training and study would be needed to determine the risk involved in this ice problem, as these engineers only worked with foam involving tests throughout the shuttle primarily. They worked for a short time. However, the study of ice risk using models, labs, experiments with ice and other objects that may be used in their test component that were only a part of the shuttle process. How would you risk quantification problems to resolve if there exists a difference of opinion between customers and contractors? I feel the customers is one of the final words, the one that has the final words on whether or not the project is acceptable based on the risk involved. It, however, is the contractor's responsibility to have the main knowledge of the project to strive for a goal and missions of the project. The contractor is one that should provide the ideas and opinions for the customer, which is the one that should be making the final decision on the project, as they know what they want. I think both parties were to meet and discuss the various events and the steps of the project. They would become more in agreement in the end. When one has quantifying risk involved in a project, having proper documentation helps to look at the data, the facts in front of them. There would be very little room for any kind of judgment or opinion that could be made. All the facts would be very clear. Next question. Were probabilities assigned to any of the risks? Why or why not? Despite the cold weather and ice, NASA didn't want to delay the launch again, even though they knew the probabilities of the O-rings in the rocket boosters causing a risk due to the cold air. Knowing that these rings could not seal properly in the cold air, they still thought it was an acceptable flight risk and was commanded to go ahead and launch. According to the math of the probabilities of the field joints and the O-rings working together successfully, the team came up with only 0.87, which is low rate of success compared to what it was in jeopardy. Next section is on risk responsibility. First question I chose is, how does the organization decide what is or what is not acceptable risk? First, one must know what the acceptable risk is. It is the exposure of a risk that is accepted by an individual, a group, a company, or an organization. The risk gets determined by the probability and impact of the risk. Sometimes risk can be reduced to a zero factor, such as in budget scheduling and other secondary risk. The level of acceptable risk can vary from place to place, which is what may be acceptable in one organization and may not be in another, even if they are similar in nature. In the Challenger shuttle situation, I feel the risk was unacceptable and should never have been questioned as to how to handle it in the best interest of everyone involved. What methods of risk response were used at NASA? I feel that the situation at NASA did not have any risk response that would be legitimate or efficient. NASA identified most of the risk as acceptable risk. NASA did not use any quantitative methods used for the risk assessment because getting needed data, documentation, and information would be too expensive and time-consuming. Are waivers a type of risk response mechanism? Yes. A waiver is a liability form or an acknowledgement of a risk form, which is served as informational items to let people know that what kind of potential risk they may be involved in if they are going to do what they are doing. Did the engineers at Triaco and NASA do all they could to convince their own management that it was wrong risk response mechanism about to be taken? I don't feel as though they had done that. There's a larger magnitude of problem and issues, then there was more than they can handle or respond to at that time. I don't feel that they did everything they could do or could have done to convince management that they were taking the wrong response to what was going to possibly happen. When NASA discounted the effects of the weather, did NASA risk response mechanism violate the responsibility to ensure crew safety? In this situation, we see the failure to determine the integrated environmental and performance needs to quantify the condition at the time. They needed to design and test for all types of weather, what would be expected or could be expected at the time of launch. They also needed to know the safety limits and the performance limitations of the situation, both on the ground and during flight, to ensure that they would develop, incorporate, monitor in performance before, during, and after the flight. The next section is on risk control. How much documentation should it be necessary for tracking a risk management plan? A risk management plan should contain continuous, formal documentation, reporting or information for each project performed. This is the basis for monitoring risk and potential risk, or action which might result in the action being done to correct the situation. Should someone have stopped the Challenger launch, and if so, how could this have been accomplished without risking anyone's job or career? I feel yes, the leaders of the Challenger project should have stopped the launch to avoid the risk of ultimately including losing the astronauts' lives. NASA is responsible for every aspect of the unique technical and scientific achievements. Any human accidents in space flight can be looked at as the fault of the engineer, but it also leads back to its leaders, as they should be overseeing the project to ensure accuracy and avoid risk at all costs. I feel it would be the leader's position to stop the launch when they felt as though there was a risk involved, rather than allowing it to happen and being reactive to the situation rather than proactive. Engineers and leaders in this case had been in a risk of a seal leaking due to cold temperatures, and they knew this. Communications through NASA could have led to a clearer picture of the risk involved that everyone would be taking by launching the satellite. Next question. Because of the ice problem, Rockwell could not guarantee the shuttle safety, but did nothing to veto the launch. Is there a better way to handle the situation as this to be handled in the future? Yes, I feel there is a better way for the situation to be handled in the future. In case studies that engineers didn't speak up more diligently because of chain of command and fear of what would happen to them if they went against orders and responses. In this meeting where stakes are high, there's a need to be ways that everyone can communicate without the fear of retaliation or retribution from the superior. This can be done in many ways through unanimous feedback and checks and balances. What is the risk? What level of risk should have been acceptable for the launch? There's always some risk involved in any launch. This is the calculation and the balances between the risk and the rewards. Quite often the risk failure becomes high and unreal for many engineers. The risk in the Challenger launch was too high normally. It would be best to have minimal or manageable amount of safety risk contingency ready to prevent catastrophe, such as the one that occurred. How should we handle a situation where people in authority believe that the potential reward justifies what they believe to be relatively minor risk? In all situations, there is a need to be responsible and accountable for any individual with authority to act or to make decisions. The astronauts are the ones that are taking the risk when they put their trust and faith in individuals planning and preparing everything for the launch. There's a check and balance situation whereby individuals should have consequences for incorrect judgments and decisions made. And finally, the last part of this is the list of references that were used to do this particular assignment. Thank you.